So Avraham is now forced to acknowledge that his life has taken a turn. Sarah is no longer here. Yitzchak is an adult. It's time for him to marry. Now you could question, why didn't he marry until now? He was 37. So we don't know. I mean, there probably were many evenings in the tent, Avraham saying to Sarah, are you sure she's not the right one for him? I said, it's just not going. Okay, clear. But we do know it didn't happen. Okay, so what brought Avraham into looking into it was what's described in the first pasuk in Perek of Dalet. Do you have Chumashim with you today? Okay, next time bring Chumashim. So if you do, open it up to chapter 24, which is Kaf Daled. It says, V'Avraham zaken ba biyamim, v'Hashem bevech et Avraham bakol. Avram was old. He had come in days, and Hashem blessed Avraham with all things. So the concept of Avraham being old and have his days having come. So there are two ways of growing old. One is, as we described yesterday, your chart ended at 40, and then you just spend more and more years trying to recapture that year, 40, 45, again and again and again. But there's another way, Babi Amim, which means your days come, where every day has its own content. So one of the things that causes people to age is unhappiness. I'm sure you've seen this. That old people oftentimes seem older than they actually are because their interpretation of their lives is very unhappy. Why do you think, by and large, old people suffer from depression as much as they do? Okay, so a lot of it comes from this, that people's sense of self-value and self-worth, which are very important components to happiness, come from achievement. So if a person's definition of achievement is physical and material, their body or their job, as they get older, their sense of achievement diminishes. So the worst thing that could happen in terms of the fatality charts, when a man retires, his likelihood of dying within the next 10 years increases dramatically. Did you know this? So the reason is that the lack of self-esteem inherent of not having a job is that bad. Okay? So that's one reason. There's more. Another reason is that by the nature of things, everything physical diminishes with age. So there's a Gemara that explains what that's for. So the Gemara says the patriarchs asked for three things. Each one asked for something else. So Avraham asked for aging. Why? So when Yitzchak was born, as you remember from last week's Parsha, he was conceived shortly after Sarah had spent the night in Avimelech's house. So people, the Yemtas of the time, as we learned last time, were saying that's Avimelech's child, right? So when he was born, he looked exactly like Avraham. So people had said, he's Avram's child, fine. But when he was, let's say, before there was aging, so if he was 30 and Avraham looked like a 30-year-old, people didn't know who was the father and who was the son, which today would be everybody's fantasy. Could you see this? So they have these commercials for oil of Olay. Do they still have oil of Olay? Yeah. They had it when I was a child. So on TV, there'd be a screen, and there were two holes. And you see a hand coming out of each hole. Then the voice is on. Which is the mother, and which is the daughter, with oil of Olay? Okay, I got this. Okay, so today people would be very flattered if somebody says, is this your daughter, is this your sister, right? Avram didn't like it. Why do you think Avram didn't like that people thought he was the same age as Yitzchak?
Yitzchak was younger.
Yitzchak was his son. Okay. So he said, I have something to show for my life. Why should I act as though like decades and decades had no existence? I want to look my age. I've become something through these years. He worked by the chart we learned yesterday. So he didn't want to look young. Okay. But you could think if an old person should look different than a young person, why not have you start off bent, wrinkled, and with gray hair and bad teeth? And as you get older, you start looking younger and younger, if you know what I mean. Till by the time you're 100, you're straight, great skin, bright eyes. Okay, why doesn't it go that way? What do you think? Why does being old not only look different than youth, but also worse?
Because I think you're more worn out. You did things. You
So I'm saying, why did Hashem make it that way? That's what I'm asking.
You worked. You
Okay, it shows also that you've done something, and also it allows the person as they age to redefine themselves. So if somebody is defining themselves only by their physical beauty or their energy level, then their body is telling them, find a new definition. This isn't where you want to be. So Avraham is our epitome of this. So he is old, and he had come in his time. So we said that he asked for 3 different things. Yitzchak asked for illness. He said, it's not right that people die suddenly. What's good about being ill before you die?
You know what's coming.
You know what's coming, so you have time to put your affairs together, to refine yourself. Okay, people often say, if I only knew what I know now 30 years ago, I would have lived differently. Okay, clear? Yaakov said illness before death isn't good enough. You need illness when you're in the middle of your life every so often. So let's say you come down with a real flu and you're out of it for a couple of days, yeah? So what's that supposed to do for you? What do you think that's supposed to do for you?
Make you appreciate your body when it's healthier.
To make you appreciate your body, to commit to doing things with your body, and to not cause you to reach a point where later you'll say, if I only knew, etc., etc. So Avram is old and his days had come, and he's our example of this. And he realized that it's really important to find a match for Yitzchak, because where's continuity going to come from? The pasuk ends that it says, God blessed Avram with everything. This is a very bizarre midrash. Want to hear a bizarre midrash? Well, what's everything? He had a daughter. What's everything? He didn't have a daughter. What's everything? He had a daughter, and her name was Bakol, which means in everything. So I have to tell you about midrash before you what? Okay, midrash isn't meant to be understood literally. It's meant to be understood metaphorically and symbolically. So the first face of the midrash is he had a daughter, meaning no one is complete if they only have a son. Okay, but Ramban would say this can't possibly be literal, because what happened to Avram's daughter? Why don't we hear about her? So it says, no, he didn't have a daughter. But how could that be considered a blessing? How could not having something be a blessing? Put yourself in Avram's shoes. How would not having a daughter be a blessing?
Because you wouldn't have to sacrifice. Or like girls are harder than guys, like dating, marriage.
Who would she marry? Who would she marry? There was nobody in the world who would be worthy of a daughter of Avraham. And the third one is he had a daughter called Bakol, which takes us into Kabbalah land, which is that anybody's influence on the world is called their daughter. The same way that you give birth to an actual child, your influence gives birth to innumerable effects. So I want to give you an example of this. How did your parents meet each other? Do you know?
My parents,
Yeah.
they went on a blind date.
They went on a blind date, which was arranged by a third person, right? And here you are. Okay. Now, could that third person have anticipated your existence? Is the story ending there? No. You'll have grandchildren. You'll have great-grandchildren. Who knows? Okay. So that third person, by saying, why don't you meet each other? I think you'd be a great match, gave birth to innumerable effects that once the decision is made can no longer be controlled. Could you see where this is so? But these effects are called daughter. Why daughter? Why not sons? Why not just the sort of power of child? So the difference between a son and a daughter is that when you're using symbolic language, the nature of the feminine is to receive and build. The nature of the masculine is to give forth, just like in reproduction. So when you're saying people have daughters, that means that there are people who received from them and used what they received to build. Okay, clear? So what we're saying is Avram had a daughter. He had enormous influence in the world. Everybody is affected by Avram. The idea of monotheism and accountability affects everyone. But he had none of his own. Okay, clear? So therefore, what does he do? So Avraham speaks to his servant, the elder of his household, the one who's in control of all of his things, and he wants him to make an oath. The way he invites him to make an oath is very strange by our mentality. He says, place your hand under my thigh, meaning Put your hand where the Brit Milah is. Today, nobody would do this. They would think that they were so weird if somebody were to say this. Is that not so? So what's going on here? So first of all, who is this servant? This servant is Eliezer. The one who went to war, right, the same one. So who was he? So after the flood, the world was divided by Noah amongst his sons. We learned, those of you who were there, about who these sons were: Shem, Ham, Yefet. So they all reflected three different approaches to life. The only one that concerns us now is Ham. Eliezer was a descendant of Ham. Ham literally means heat or energy. So one approach to life is passion. So think about South American Mardi Gras, think about Africa altogether, you know, the endless drum rhythms, the dancing. Okay, there are people who approach life in that way. Okay, could you see where this is true, even in today's world? So now I'm going to take you to a distant view of these societies. Is there anybody in this room who wouldn't describe African history as tragic? How many of you see the history as tragic? I see that African history is terribly tragic. You all do? What's tragic about it? What do you see as the tragedy of Africa?
I really don't know the history.
What?
I don't know African history.
Okay, so you don't know that. What would you say?
Apartheid.
Hmm?
Apartheid.
That's in white Africa. I'm talking about all of Africa.
Slavery. They were in.
Okay, the slavery, the colonialization, the being stuck in time, which they are, the meaningless wars, the abject savagery. It's all part of one thing. What is it all part of? It's part of living a life in the now where passion dictates everything. So, which it doesn't have to be this way, but this is how it is. So when you're looking at slavery, which is certainly a great evil, who sold the Africans into slavery? Other Africans. Why did they do that? Because they wanted the immediate reward they would get from the Portuguese traders. Is that true or not? How did colonialism begin? Who let foreign traders in and who gave them power? The Africans. Why? Because they wanted immediate reward. So the curse of Ham is if you don't take control of this trait of wanting to be in the now and living with passion, you're going to end up enslaved. Okay, clear? So it's not a statement. The Christian fundamentalists see this as an instruction. Enslave the Africans. No. You're saying this nature enslaves you. Okay, if you don't take control of it. So when you look at Obama as an example, he took absolute control of everything that his background took, and he gave himself direction and focus. Could you see where this is so? He's not a slave. He's the president of the United States. But if he would be living a life of passion and in the now, there's no way he would have become who he is. Is that true? Okay, so Eliezer was from Ham. So he recognized his own proclivities. He was honest with himself. So he decided that, yes, he wants to lead to something bigger than himself, and he became Avraham's servant. So this was a huge decision. I'm not a leader, I'm a follower. So I'm going to follow someone who I believe in. But Avraham wasn't his first master. His first master was Nimrod. He left Nimrod's service to be a servant of Avraham. He rose until Avraham referred to him as being almost like his heir. But what held him back? Why wasn't he Avraham's actual heir? Because this tendency works, you could be a tzaddik. This is why the name Eliezer is a Jewish name. People often name children Eliezer. He was a tzaddik. But it doesn't work for leadership. And Avraham wanted his son to carry forth his mission, which involved leadership. So if you want to hear what a tzaddik Eliezer is, he says, swear to me by the Brit Milah. What does the Brit Milah say? It says that normal physical passions and desires require a definition that's spiritual. He says, swear to me by this. This is something that's my heritage. So he did. And here's the oath. He said, I want you to swear by God, the God of heaven and of earth, that you will not take for my son a wife, a daughter of the Canaanites with whom I'm living. Go back to my land, to my birthplace, and find there a wife for my son, for Yitzchak. So this should raise several questions, because everything we're going to be learning from this point on is about how to get married. So the first thing is, why is he sending Eliezer? Who should he send? Yitzchak. Why does he say, Yitzchak, take my card, okay? Get a plane to, wear a costume. Look there, get involved in the social scene. Okay, so the reason why, and the Gemara speaks about this, the best way to meet someone, for reasons I'm going to say, is through somebody else. So your parents met on a blind date that was arranged, right? Anybody else's parents met through someone? A mutual friend? Okay, yeah? Now I want to contrast this to another picture. There was a film that was popular at its time, which you probably didn't see because it's old, called Love Story. Did any of you see this? So Love Story is what it sounds like. And it begins, the opening scene is in Harvard Library, where a girl who's there on scholarship, but gosh, this is the movie, this is extraordinarily beautiful. Okay, she's sitting studying in the library, and in comes our hero, and he's like the heir of a huge fortune, and their eyes meet, and there's electricity in the air. And you've just seen the whole movie, right? 2.5 hours worth, you've just seen the whole thing, right? Okay. What's wrong with meeting through that system?
You're blinded. You can't.
Okay, this is a meeting of androgen and estrogen. You understand this? That's what attraction is made out of. So there's nobody who knew either party between them who could say, there's something that they have in common. They have common ideals, they have common desires, common something. It's just body meets body. So that's the worst way to meet someone, because the attraction that often is there. What's the problem with the attraction? The attraction is wonderful. Attraction is the glue of a relationship. But what's its limitation?
It waxes and wanes.
First of all, as we said already, people don't become more and more beautiful as they age. But also, it reaches a point, if you have a real relationship, where when you look at the other person, you see the person. And if you don't like the person, even if what you see body-wise is beautiful, you don't want to be in the relationship. That makes sense to you? So I remember we had a family friend who got engaged to a girl who was like really gorgeous, like magazine cover gorgeous. And they came to eat dinner by us. And my husband said, this is a disaster. And, and I was thinking, maybe it's not a disaster. It was the worst marriage I ever saw. She was like very, very talky, very aggressive. And I reached a point where he couldn't bear being in the room with her. In order to get out of this marriage, he gave her full custody of their only child, an apartment and a car. Okay, like he would do anything to get out. So he didn't see her beauty anymore. Do you understand this? It was like because he saw her. So the best way is to meet through somebody else. So the first thing we have is Avraham sending Eliezer. Now Eliezer is on whose side? Avraham's. So the third person should be somebody who's involved, who's on your side. So the limitation in going to somebody who's a professional matchmaker is on whose side are they? Their own side. They just want to make the match. So it's good to have somebody who's in it with you, who's on your side, a shidduch mentor. Okay, clear? So he gives him instructions. He says, don't take a Canaanite woman for my son. Why not? So let's go back to the 3 sons of Noach. The Canaanites were descendants of Ham. He said, you're a tzaddik, but that's not what my son needs. Okay, he's instructing him to go back to his own birthplace. Now what you see is when he finds Rivka did not come from an exemplary family. Okay, in fact, there were terrible people. Her brother, Lavan, was called Lavan, which means like white, like whitey, because he was completely blank of anything positive or good. There was like, you couldn't fill in the spaces with, at least he's kind to his parent, nothing. Okay, her father, Betuel, the word Betuel comes from the word Betulah, which means virgin. We don't know his real name. People called him Betuel because his hobby was to seduce virgins. So she didn't exactly come from an exemplary family. So you would think that Eliezer failed his mission. Okay, but there are 2 things that define a person. their beliefs and opinions, and their core midos, their core character. Beliefs and opinions are changeable. A person's core character is not changeable. So because of this, when Eliezer went to look for someone, he was looking at the core character. And he was not looking at the beliefs and opinions, since they're negotiable, they change. So then it goes on, and he says, maybe she's not going to want to come with me. So should I bring your son to her? Okay, and he says, no, whatever it is, don't bring my son back there. Okay, so from here, when you have in the text, what if she doesn't want to come, you learn that in Judaism you can't get married against your will, which I want you to know in the ancient world was like considered very radical. So even today, in Mideastern society, are women married off by their fathers, whether they like the idea or not? They are. When I was a student, so I'm not going back 500 years, there was an open-air market in Beersheba, and the Bedouins would come to trade things. It was a once-a-week market, and you would see sometimes a Bedouin father with a heavily veiled girl next to him, and people would bid with him for the daughter. Nobody asked her anything. Okay, and it was about whoever the father thought fit into their sociology and whoever offered the most money. It was like, that's how it was in recent times. So he said, no, she has to want to come. Okay, and don't bring my son back there, because for a shidduch to be good, they have to be headed in the same direction, but the direction should be up. So now I want to give you some Talmudic instructions about how to know who you want to marry. Okay, so the most basic of all instructions is to look for commonality, because the core of marriage is communication, and communication is verbal, it's also physical, but you want to build together. So in order for that to happen, it helps to have similarity. So that would mean similarity in age. There shouldn't be huge age differences. So it says in the Talmud that marrying a young girl to an old man it's creating promiscuity, because she'll end up wanting to have an affair with a younger man. Okay, clear? Look for similarity in background so that you understand each other. So by that I want to give you an example. So I have a friend who's from California. Any of you from California? No, okay, Northern California, very cool, very countercultural. You have the picture? So she met a man from the Syrian community in Brooklyn, which is none of the above. Okay, and so they met, and they're going out, and they thought they were being honest with each other. So he says to her, I think we could live simply at the beginning. What did the word live simply at the beginning mean to him?
With their parents.
Oh, no. In the Syrian community, the guys don't get married until they're established in business. Nobody lives with their parents. That's why there's often an age gap between the man and the woman, because the man has to be established financially. Okay, it means, later he told her, all I meant is we don't have to have a live-in right away when there are just the two of us. We could be simple. We don't have to have a place both in Brooklyn and in Deal. We could start with one home. That's what he meant. Okay? What do you think she meant? Think Northern California.
Studio apartment.
Cottage small by the waterfall. You don't have to have electricity. You don't have to, got the picture? So they get married, and everything is so hard for them. Could you see this? Not because they're not good people. So I was there for Shabbos once, and they were married years already. So she set the table. She brought out the Kiddush cup. It wasn't polished, okay? And he winced. He didn't say a word, but I said, after all these years, he still hasn't adjusted to her, and she still isn't living up to his expectations. And it's not good. You understand this? So look for similarity so you speak the same language. It's good if you're coming from basically the same economic background so that you have the same economic goals, unless you talk it out and you have different goals. Okay, it's good to have very similar character traits. So if you have somebody who's bubbly and outgoing and loves people, if they marry somebody who's reclusive, inwardly directed, and likes silence, this is going to require a lot of adjustment. Religiously, it's not important that you're exactly on the same level, but it is important that you're going in the same direction. So a big shidduch mistake that people sometimes make is introducing a boy from a religious family who's going down to a girl who's coming from a non-religious family who's going up. So right now they're on the same level of observance, but that's not where they want to be. She wants more, he wants less. You understand this? Okay, so you don't have to marry your twin, okay? But similar makes it easier. Having said that, if you're a flexible person, difference could work, but you have to be honest about your own flexibility. So I'll give you an example. I'll give you a bad example. I'll give you an example with other friends. So there was a couple. How did they meet? She wasn't Jewish at the time. She's living in Germany. She's very beautiful. She acts in Shakespearean plays, okay? He's Israeli. He finished the army. In Israeli culture, after the army, you go travel somewhere. So he didn't have enough money to travel in the East, which is like the place of choice. So he was traveling in Europe. He got a job with a stage company working as a stagehand. He's very good looking, okay? So here they are. They have a very torrid summer, okay? She's an actress. He's a very good looking stagehand. They don't even physically have much of a common language. They're talking to each other in bad English. Okay, clear? So at the end of the summer, he tells her, you know, I'm going back to Israel. We're not going to see each other again. There's no future for us. Bye. Okay, that's his line. And she said, why? Why can't I come to Israel? Or you could stay here. Why do we have to separate? So he said, my family will never accept you, and I belong in Israel. That's where I feel my roots are. That's where I'm going. Okay, so he leaves. So she's trying to figure this out, because in her family she could marry anyone. Why is his family different?
Jewish.
Okay, his family is Jewish, but she had never met Jews. Okay, so she began reading up on Jews, Judaism, and she discovered the Holocaust. She heard about World War II. World War II was a terrible conflict where many people were killed. But the concentration camps, never heard a word. She had finished school. It just somehow got sort of erased from their version of history. So she began to ask people in her family about this, and she discovered her grandmother was a Nazi. Okay, so she began to read more, and she decided that she's making a break from this. This isn't where she wants to be. So she decided to convert to Judaism. So where she lived in Germany, in Munich, at the time there were no rabbis who could do conversions. So the rabbi there told her that if she wants to convert, she should go to Israel. So she came to Israel. She took a conversion course. How long does it take, a conversion course for someone with zero background? What do you think?
2 years.
Close to 2 years, okay? In the meantime, he's back home. He lives in Beersheba. And he keeps on thinking about her. And he asks, his family is Moroccan traditional. So he said, like, what would have happened if I would have brought back, okay, and we'd never speak to you again, you'd be out the door, you'd be, whatever. So he asked his grandfather, who was the one who felt the strongest about this, what's the difference? Like, why is it a difference? She's a person, I'm a person. What is the difference? I'm not that religious, you know that. You keep Shabbat, I don't do Shabbat. I'll come to hear Kiddush from you, but that's about it, So he said, I don't have the words to explain it to you. But remember, there's like 3,000 years of history. You don't know it. Go to a yeshiva and ask people who know what they're talking about. So he went to the Israeli Or Sameach, okay? So she's finishing conversion, and he's in Or Sameach now for 2 years, okay? So a shadchan gets involved and says, wow, you have so much in common. Like, you traveled a lot. She's to Europe. You said you liked Europe. She's from Europe. And, you're very charismatic, and she's very attractive. Okay, and they actually got married. So here they are. They're married. They live in Ramat Shlomo. But it required such flexibility for both of them, but they're just amazingly flexible people. So she learned how to be a Moroccan daughter-in-law. Do you realize what that is sociologically? That means, like, if your mother-in-law comes to visit, it's normal to you if she opens the closets and tells you if the clothes are folded nicely or not. It's like, it's okay if she tells you that your food's not good enough, that you should make something different. She learned how to pull this off. And with grace and yeah, it's good. She folds the closet, but her clothes are neater than mine, so why shouldn't I want to learn? I said, okay. Tziporah, shut your mouth. Don't tell her what you're thinking. Okay. She learned the language. She learned the food. She learned everything. He became so flexible towards her family that he was even willing to send their kids to the German embassy once a week to learn German, so that when the non-Jewish grandparents come, they could speak to them in German. This is a big stretch, okay, clear? So they're flexible. So before you ask yourself whether or not you could marry someone from a different background, ask yourself one question. Am I flexible? And don't just say yes. Ask yourself, what's my track record? Where have I ever had to change? How do I respond to difference? What's the truth here? So this is something that once happened in their house. So his brother came for Shabbat. His brother's not religious, okay? But before his brother came, just like that month, her parents came for a visit. Now her kids then were just getting old enough to notice things, because when they were babies, like, who cares? So her oldest son was 4.5, so she figured she better tell them that her parents are different, otherwise he won't know what to do with this. So she said, remember Avraham? Yeah, he learned about Avraham. Remember how Avraham talked about Hashem to a lot of different people? Yes, he remembers that. But he only had one son, Yitzchak, right? But all these other people are just regular people. But Avraham loved them and took them into his home and taught them about Hashem. But these people are not Jews. Okay, clicked. There were Jews and non-Jews. Now when you're 4, this is already a big, And non-Jews don't have the Torah like the Jews have. Only the Jews have the Torah. The non-Jews don't have to eat kosher, they don't have to have a hechsher on their candies, because Hashem only let the Jews come to him close by so many ways. They just have 7 mitzvos. He didn't give them as many. So they could be good non-Jews, but they only have 7 mitzvahs, okay? Click, he got it, okay? Now she saw she's on a roll explaining to him about different people, so she thought grab the moment. But there are also people who are bad people. He's 4, this is Israel, where there's a big street culture. People let their kids play outside. So they could be Jews, they could be not Jews. But sometimes people even tell children, I'll give you candy, come into my car. But they want to do bad things, so you have to stay away from bad people. Okay, he got it. And then she said there are people who are good people, but they don't do all the mitzvahs because they didn't learn it. Like, right, you learned about Avraham. Some people didn't even learn anything, so you got it. Okay, so he knows 4 categories of people. Jews, non-Jews, bad people, and people who are good but don't keep mitzvahs, right? So here her brother, her husband, whose name is Avi, Avi's brother is there for Shabbat. He's very respectful, so he came with a kippah, and he did everything right. He comes from a traditional home. But after the meal, like everybody went to bed, he stayed in the living room and he was like smoking and reading a newspaper. And the 4-year-old gets up. He says, which one are you? So he says, one what? He tells them, are you a Jew, a guy, a bad person, or a Jew who doesn't keep mitzvot? He found that offensive for some reason. Okay, whatever. Okay, so so there are categories, and you could be flexible, but you have to check yourself out. So the first thing is similarity. The next thing is having common goals. So you could have a great deal in common, but if your goals aren't common goals, somebody's going to have to give up their dream. So you have to be able to have a strong sense of what your goals are in marriage before you start going out seriously, and you have to be able to convey them honestly. Okay, clear? Next thing, you have to respect your husband and like him. It's not enough just to like him. Why isn't it enough just to like him?
Because superficial. Superficial, doesn't last.
Okay, so no, emotional liking also lasts, but men like respect. If you don't respect him, he'll know it and he'll be unhappy. And if he's unhappy, who else will be unhappy? You'll be unhappy. It's not enough just to like him. You have to respect him. It's not enough to respect him. You also have to like him. Why do you have to like him? Because he's your husband. And women like affection and communication. So even if you respect him, if you don't like him, you won't be happy. And if you're not happy, who else won't be happy?
You won't be happy then.
Right, so you have to like him and respect him. So there has to be commonality, similar goals, liking and respect him. And the last thing is there has to be some degree of attraction. So it's on the list, but it's number 4, it's not number 1. So with attraction, men and women are different. Women sometimes develop attraction to someone once they like them. So it's not uncommon to have something like a girl goes out and says, oh, he's a great guy, I really admire him. I can't handle his South African accent. It makes me feel like I'm listening to an actor in a play. Third date, he's so charming and that South African accent is so classy. Okay, clear? So girls change with how much kesher they feel to the person. Men don't change. If they're not attracted the first date, they're also not attracted the third date. So it's just like not worth pushing a guy into seeing somebody. Okay, clear? So that's basically the rules of the game. We're going to see it inside the text next time.